I'm just a Bill. Yes, I'm only a Bill. And I'm sitting here on Capitol Hill. Well, it's a long, long journey to the capital city. It's a long, long wait while I'm sitting in committee. But I know I'll be a law someday. At least I hope and pray that I will. But today I am still just a Bill.
Good morning, Bucknutters. It's Monday, December 19th, 2016. I am Dan Rubin. This is the Bucknuts Morning 5 and change. You may be a tad surprised not to hear the dulcet tones of Dave Biddle. Dave has earned himself a much-deserved week off, so I will be running the show here 5 days a week. So I figured what better way to start than with the Dean. If you have access to the Dean, you get the Dean. So we are joined by the Dean of Ohio State Recruiting, Bill Kurelic. Bill, thanks for waking up early on this fine Monday morning.
Good morning, Dan. Always good to be here and talk a little Buckeye recruiting.
And that's what we're going to do. We're going to kind of get you set here. It's been an incredible run for the class of 2017. It's been some of the best recruiting we've ever seen. I've marveled at some of the exploits. Number one on my list is the ability to go into Texas and get guys that they have. But what we're going to do now is kind of set the agenda here for the rest of the recruiting class. They have 17 guys in the class. And as I was going over this, Bill, I just want to kind of go over each guy I have on the list. That list has been pared down for a variety of reasons. Let's start with the two, I guess, most likely or most talked about names in the class. I just bring everybody up to speed, make sure nothing has changed. Obviously, both defensive backs, both elite, Jeffrey Okudah and Darnay Holmes.
Yeah, and I don't think there's much question that Jeffrey Okudah is going to be in the class. I think it would take a drastic change. And it was interesting, he came out and tweeted last week, that I have not committed to anyone and won't commit to anyone until the Under Armour game, or I should say the Army All-American game. So, you know, the suspense, I guess, perhaps ratcheted up slightly with his tweet, but still, I don't think much of anybody expects him to pick anybody with Ohio State come the Army All-American Bowl on January 7th. So, feel from a Ohio State standpoint, great about that one. With Darnay Holmes, that one's looking good and all, but the interesting situation there is that at least one, if not two other schools are still working hard and still thinking that they are going to get Darnay Holmes, those being UCLA, who was the longtime favorite in UCLA. So, you know, I think maybe Buckeye fans will be more on pins and needles when he makes his announcement, which is supposed to be also at the Army game, than Jeffrey Okudah. But to say the least, it could be a very exciting U.S. Army All-American Bowl for Buckeye fans.
Real quick, you said UCLA and UCLA. I believe you meant UCLA and USC. Is that correct?
Yes. UCLA, the longtime leader, and then USC, the Trojans, still are working hard, still think they have a shot, and still think they could end up with Darnay Holmes.
Speaking of which, this is a guy we didn't talk about before the show in our prep, but it made me think of it. USC and Bubba Bolden. That's another defensive back that we've talked about a lot, and now it seems like USC, at least from what I've read, has pulled into the pole position. Is that the way you see it, or is he someone we should still keep an eye on for the Buckeyes?
I think Buckeye fans are going to watch his announcement, certainly, but I think it would be surprising if he announced that he was not going to USC. You know, I think that's, if you look at the crystal ball, it's heavily gone in that direction. And he has made his he has made his decision, and he is going to announce it at the Army Bowl. And I think if there's not a change of thinking as far as I'm thinking, I think he will be announcing that he's going to USC.
Okay, Bill, I kind of got these guys broken into tiers or little groups here. The next group after the elite defensive backs we kind of expect to be in the mix are kind of the two defensive tackles they have chased ad nauseum, Jake Tufele and Marvin Wilson. I've said this many times. If there's one thing the Ohio State staff has not done since they've arrived in Columbus is pull in the probably elite defensive tackle. Not that it's slowed them down on the field or this is any prerequisite for success, but it does seem like those chases have a lot of hours, not a lot of results. So Jay Tufele and Marvin Wilson, I have to say right now, based on what I've read from you and other guys, I don't have a great vibe. Either one of them will be a Buckeye. What's the latest?
Well, first, going back to a lot of people have mentioned that Ohio State hasn't pulled in one of the great elite defensive tackles, and there's a reason for that. And the reason being is there's just not very many of those guys out there. That defensive tackles, great defensive tackles that can run and stuff the run and rush the passer. Those aren't guys that you find very often. Those guys and cornerbacks, great cover cornerbacks, are very difficult to find and land. Corners a little bit easier, but that's a big part of the reason that Ohio State hasn't done that. And most of the guys that have fit that bill in the last 4, 5, 6 years have been from the South, and getting a guy like that from the South to come north is a difficult chore to do. Certainly there's been exceptions. Christian Wilkins, of course, from the East Coast was one of them that ended up at Clemson. And then this year you've got a couple exceptions, namely Jay Tufele, and then, of course, Marvin Wilson from Texas. And, my feeling has been all along that Ohio State has a better chance at Jay Tufele than people are giving them credit for. They have a realistic shot at landing him. I've always felt that Wilson will end up staying in the South when all is said and done, and I still feel that way. I think Ohio State has a chance at him, but I think that the better odds favor him staying in the South and going to LSU or somewhere else in the South. But with Tufele, I think it's going to come down. I think Ohio State has passed Michigan now for his services. I think it's going to come down to Ohio State or staying close to home with Tufele, and I think Ohio State's got a legitimate shot there.
And what's Tufele's announcement plan? Has he made that clear?
He hasn't made an exact timetable or set an exact timetable for an announcement. He is going to be at the Army Bowl. I will talk to him there, but I don't think he's going to do it that soon. I think he's going to continue to take visits. He's been on official visits to Ohio State and Michigan, and I think he will at least take 1 or 2 more visits before he decides, but he hasn't said for sure. So, we'll find out. Hopefully it's more at the Army All-American Bowl in the beginning of January.
So it does look like, as I look at our list here that we've discussed, and we've got some more names on it, Tufele and Wilson are the ones that are going to go the longest. Both could be a signing day commitment. I mean, we don't know that about Tufele, but I believe Wilson has already made it clear he's going to commit on signing day.
Yeah, he and his coach have both made it clear he's not announcing till National Signing Day. And Tufele hasn't declared when he's going to announce, so we'll see. But I don't think Tufele will wait till signing day, but I also don't think it's going to be in the next week or two.
Very interesting. Okay, the next group of guys I have here is kind of 2 athletic defensive back types that we've talked about a lot recently. There have been crystal balls flipped their way for Ohio State, and I've seen crystal balls flipped to several other destinations, and that's Markquese Bell and Kendall Sheffield. Bell is kind of an athletic type out of New Jersey. Sheffield is a guy who started at Alabama, then went to junior college, and is now looking for his second Division I destination. Get us up to speed on Bell and Sheffield.
Well, Sheffield is basically down to 2 and maybe 3 schools. It had been Ohio State and Texas A&M, but our old friend Tom Herman and his staff at Texas have come in with Sheffield and are hoping to sway him to stay in state. Right now, I'd pick Texas A&M as his choice. The situation with him is that he loved Ohio State. His parents loved it when they made the official visit out here, but they went away from home, so to speak, the first time. They went to Alabama out of high school for Kendall Sheffield. And now I think the feeling is that, you know, they may not want to go far away from home again this time. And that's a big lure for him with Texas A&M. Now, he does feel strongly that Ohio State and his parents feel the same way, can help him get to the next level with the success they've had with their defensive backs in the NFL draft and all. And I mentioned that, by the way, is what I am hearing from last night. But will that be enough? I don't know. I tend to doubt it. I think he's going to end up at Texas A&M in the end. As far as Markquese Bell, a lot of it will just depend on faith in the class, I think, with Ohio State. He is planning to announce January 1st, and if Ohio State has faith, I think they have a pretty decent shot at getting him. If not, it's pretty wide open for Markquese Bell. You've got a number of other schools that all feel like they have a pretty good chance of landing Markquese Bell. It's hard to tell which way he would go if he doesn't end up at Ohio State. There's no doubt that Rutgers thinks they have a shot at him still. Virginia Tech does. Maryland, I think, might even be a sleeper favorite there. So, we'll see as far as which way he goes. But my gut feeling is right now that he may not end up being in this Ohio State class.
Bill, I touched on it earlier to start the show, and then you just mentioned it. What Ohio State has done in Texas in this rotation, this recruiting class is incredible. To get Barron Browning, J.K. Dobbins, and hopefully Jeffrey Okudah out of the class, it's basically unheard of to do something like that. I said this on the Bucknuts 90 yesterday. I don't think it's going to be as easy to recruit Texas going forward with Tom Herman there. Would you agree with that?
Most likely. Yeah, I think it's going to be, at least initially, I think it'll be more difficult. And Tom Herman now, he will have a lot more time to get ready for the 2018 class, certainly, than he did for the 2017 class. So, yeah, I think initially, at least, it's going to be more difficult. And then we'll see what happens moving forward from there. But I still think Ohio State is going to have a presence there and a strong presence. Tim Beck has done a great job of recruiting that state. All of those guys that have highly considered Ohio State, while the position coaches have been very important with those guys, the lead guy, the initial guy with those guys has all been Tim Beck. So you've got to hand it to the recruiting job he's done in the state of Texas.
Okay, so that's been kind of the word on the boards is who gets credit for Texas. So you think it's justified, some of the credit people are giving Tim Beck for what's gone on in this recruiting cycle?
Oh, there's absolutely no question. And, I talk to these guys a lot and or their coaches, and they all mention Tim Beck. So there's no question. He's had a big presence. With Jeffrey Okudah, in talking to his coach, he tells me how often Tim Beck is checking in on Jeffrey Okudah to see how things are going and checking in with the coach and so on and so forth. So, yeah, there's absolutely no question that he's played a big part in the success Ohio State's had recruiting Texas.
That's good news. Two guys whose names come up that do seem to be Plan B type options, but their names are consistent enough that I wanted you to comment on it, and that's Jaylen Harris and Thayer Munford. To me, Jaylen Harris is kind of the symbolic argument if you're writing your senior thesis on recruiting. He's the player to me that would have been a Buckeye long ago in prior regimes. He's a 6'5", fantastic athlete, also a heck of a basketball player. Just with the level of recruiting that Urban has kind of ratcheted up, there may not be a spot for that guy in the class. It just would seem to me that in classes prior, he would have been in the mix already. So your thoughts on Harris and Munford?
I don't disagree with that, and I think Jaylen Harris still certainly could get in the class. It's going to be interesting to see what happens. I think he's giving every chance he's giving himself, or giving Ohio State, I should say, every chance to for him to be in the class. I think he really likes Ohio State. He's taken 2 official visits so far. He's been to Penn State. He's been to Michigan State. He says he will make an official visit to Ohio State sometime in January, the next recruiting weekend, January 13th. That's certainly not out of the question that could be the weekend. But, he says he's going to make an official visit to Ohio State in January, probably take one to Tennessee. Alabama looks like they've pretty much fallen off, so it'll be between those 4 schools. I think it'll come down to either Ohio State on one hand, or lumping the other three schools together on the other hand, Tennessee, Michigan State, and Penn State. It's really going to be interesting to see how that plays out and see how the space situation plays out for Ohio State. Now, the other one being Thayer Munford is a different situation. Thayer's made some visits, and he's interested in Ohio State, but he still has to get everything. He's working on taking care of everything with the NCAA clearinghouse and all, and that one is going to go into January for Ohio State. There is some interest still, but not quite right now the interest that Ohio State has in Jaylen Harris, for instance. And we'll see what happens, but there is still some mutual interest there between Thayer Munford and Ohio State.
So this is semi-off topic. I've been meaning to ask you this one. I had spoken to Steve Wiltfong about this recently. I wanted to get your opinion on it. With Luke Fickle going to Cincinnati, who do you think suffers the most from Fickle being at Cincinnati? I've said I thought, I don't think, this is just my opinion, obviously, I don't think that there's a kid going to decide to go to Cincinnati over Ohio State based on Luke Fickle. But schools that make their living in Ohio, and go look at the roster of every Big Ten team or every school within 300 miles of the state, usually half their schools from Ohio. Is it going to hurt Michigan State? Is it going to hurt Kentucky, which has made its living recruiting Ohio since one of the Stoops got in there? Who is going to be hurt the most by Cincinnati getting Fickle, or do you think it'll be kind of a non-event?
I think the school the stands to lose the most would be Michigan State, just because they have recruited well in Cincinnati. Harlan Barnett, their assistant coach, has done a great job recruiting the Queen City. And I think that they stand to be the most impacted by Luke Fickle and his staff there. I think Kentucky certainly has done their job there too, and I think they'd be another school that could be impacted. But it'll be interesting to see how Michigan State does now, and how Luke Fickle does. He did a great job recruiting when he was at Ohio State, but a big part of recruiting is your assistant coaches, so he's going to have to bring in have a staff of outstanding recruiters, to really impact his program the way he wants it impacted.
There you have it, people. You will not get better knowledge than that. The dean is number one on the beat for a reason. We appreciate Bill getting up early for us this morning. Have a great day, Bucknutters.